Hi, I'm Stacy Zelli, Meat Science Extension Specialist here at Purdue University, and we're going to talk about making our own rub in order to be able to use for our meat products. When it comes to making a good spice rub, the base of any spice rub really should start with salt. Now, what salt is going to do is not only add flavor, but salt also has a very functional component too when you add it to meat and meat products. Whenever you add salt, what happens is it actually unfolds proteins and allows them to bind to each other and bind to water nicer. And so that's why, particularly when you're making like a burger or something like that, adding a little salt will help your burger patties stay together nicer. Very similar to what you've probably noticed if you've ever tried to cook hamburger patties next to sausage patties. You know, those sausages stay together really tight. One of the main reasons is because they've had salt. So the base of any good rub should start with salt. I usually start with about a half a cup of salt. But that's really only going to give us one flavor note. And so we need to kind of broaden that. And that's where adding some kind of pepper is very helpful. I personally prefer black pepper. Just using a normal ground black pepper is helpful. A teaspoon of this or a tablespoon, depending on how much you like black pepper, will really help add some depth to flavor to your overall rub. Then we like to add what we call our two savory twins, and that's going to be garlic and onion. And on these, you can add a teaspoon. I like to do a heaping teaspoon because it gives just a little bit more of your garlic and onion. Now notice that for these, I've actually used again a powder, so it's going to be more similar in particle definition to what we've got for our salt and our pepper, and that's just going to help it be more consistent when we go ahead and add that to our product. So again, when you make this normal standardized rub, this is a good base no matter what you're trying to make. Then we can always spice it up and change it a little bit, depending on what we want to add. It can really change our flavor profile. So we could add, first of all, some white pepper, gives it a little bit more heat because it's a little finer particle size. We could, of course, add something like basil or oregano. That's going to give you more of that Italian flavoring. Maybe if you want something that's a little more earthy, you can go with some thyme. If you want something with a little more heat, you can add some red pepper. But these are all things you can add on top of your standard rub in order to again, make it whatever you're looking to make. If you want something Mediterranean or you want something that's more Italian or something that's more Spanish, you can again play with those additional spices in order to get to the rub you're looking for. Now you'll notice the one thing that I didn't include in here that is possible to add is going to be sugars. Any of your sugars are going to be nice to add if you're using a low temperature cooking method. So that's if you're using something like a smoker or a crock pot or something along those lines where you're cooking your meat at a temperature less than 250 degrees. Once you get into your higher cooking temperature methods, such as a grill or a skillet or a deep fryer or something like that, using these aren't great. Your sugars will tend to burn, and so it's not usually going to be as flavorful. It's going to be more of that charred, burned flavor. So I always recommend using and adding some sugar to your rub if you're doing something, again, at a low temperature cooking, like a barbecue or something along those lines. Otherwise, these aren't necessarily always the greatest things to add for, again, your high temperature cooking. The last thing I want to touch on is particle size. These, again, I've mentioned, are all kind of sitting in a similar particle size. Now, a couple of the ones that you can actually get to go smaller, white pepper is a great example where you can get a much finer, more powder, if you will. White pepper is the same as black pepper, it's just a smaller particle size. When you go smaller with the particle size, you're going to get a better or more even distribution, so it tends to sometimes give the impression of a more intense flavor. If you go with larger particle sizes, let's use my onion for example. You've probably seen onion like this where it's in flecks or where it's just minced. This one, of course, isn't going to spread quite as easily, and so therefore it doesn't necessarily give you quite the same intensity. You get bits that are intense of flavor, but then you also have bits that don't have much flavor at all because it didn't get maybe one of your little mince pieces. So again, start with a nice base rub, have fun with it, add some things in there to be able to start you off down the path of different flavors. Whenever you're using your rub, you always want to make sure that you're going and dipping into that rub with either a clean hand or a clean utensil, a spoon or something along those lines. And then once you put it in an airtight container, it's going to be good in your cabinet for months. Thanks for visiting us on the Meat Minute.